as a follow-up to some work we did in 2017 and 2015. How many of you have encountered Housing Virginia either through using our website or attending other events of ours or using some of our research? By a show of hands. All right, good. Got a fan base here, maybe. So we are a statewide housing nonprofit. Our focus is increasing the supply of affordable housing around the state. Myself, I've been working in affordable housing for about 20 years, but I'm pretty new to Virginia. Only a couple of years in Virginia. Mostly did work in Chicago and New York, but always in affordable housing development, affordable housing production and management. Housing Virginia is a policy organization. Our focus is to develop really thoughtful policy around how to increase the supply of affordable housing, provide really quality data that is free and available to anyone on our website that synthesizes data from a number of sources, includes proprietary data that we've developed relationships with other organizations to collect, to help you understand what the housing need is, what affordable housing means in your area, and then how to go out and make that case for what is needed and why using the data. We also hold a lot of events like this, larger conferences, bringing in people from around the country to understand best practices elsewhere and to really try to come up with solutions to affordable housing. And today's meeting is going to be a little over 2 hours. I'm only going to speak for about 20-25 minutes. And then I'm going to turn it over to a conversation that we're going to have, a dialogue and a conversation we'll have. And then we brought some other speakers with us today who will also be sharing with you. And that's one of the values that I think Housing Virginia provides, is to be able to convene dialogues like this and bring the decision makers with us, develop those relationships and bring them here so that you can meet them, you can take their business card. They're very approachable resources here in the state that I hope that you take advantage of after today. So, Housing Virginia is specifically focused on rural housing in Virginia starting in 2015 with some help from USDA Rural Development and Virginia Housing Development Authority. And the idea there was that the issues facing rural Virginia are different than those that are urban. And when you aggregate it all, the issues of rural housing sort of get washed out a little, and they get diffused in that overall analysis. And so to look at rural housing in particular and to drill down on that and really to try to understand what the trends and the needs and the potential solutions are for housing in rural areas of Virginia. So in 2015, we started doing a policy report. We did a lot of data collection, and we came around the state and did events like this to hear from housers, social service organizations, local government, developers, realtors, to try to understand what was being dealt with on the ground. And those are sort of the three main components of the report that was ultimately issued in 2017. And you can find the detailed report along with a really short 4-page companion piece that is a simplified version of the report on our website. And those are really good tools for boards of supervisors or social service organizations or anyone really trying to give the basic gist of what's happening in rural Virginia around housing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time giving you the conclusions of that because I'm going to hazard a guess that most of you in the room could have helped us write that report and talk about the demographic shifts that are happening and that are impacting rural areas. The graying of the population, general population loss, and the fact that the majority of housing, the majority of population, the majority of resources are going to that crescent area of Northern Virginia down to Hampton Roads. So this is basically the set of conclusions that were arrived at through that report. So it takes a set of 3 top needs for rural housing in Virginia: rehabilitation of existing housing, because housing is substandard, housing is aging, and new housing stock isn't being created. A shortage of affordable rentals. So this real desire to see rental housing, not just single-family home ownership in rural areas, that you now have a variety of people at a variety of incomes and a variety of needs in terms of the housing type that they have, and an issue with that graying population and the need for home modifications. So that that policy is really around the idea that in rural areas where you have population aging and you have young people leaving, there are no other housing alternatives other than aging in place. And in general, people prefer to age in place. The majority of people, when polled, say that they want to stay in the home they live in, but the home is not accommodating them as they get older. And so the idea here is that in the absence of massive new construction development for seniors in rural areas, which is not something that's occurring, that the recommended strategy is to address home modifications in the homes in which seniors currently exist. So out of that report, we came up with policy recommendations under these 5 categories. And so some of those we've already discussed. The home ownership category was a set of policy recommendations about expanding lending, expanding housing stock, expanding credit. And then manufactured housing category was to really explore the opportunities in new manufactured housing and lending in the manufactured housing industry to increase this housing stock as well. And so that's sort of a departure for a lot of folks in the housing industry from many decades of considering manufactured housing as something that was very obsolete and really needed to be phased out of our housing markets. And certainly manufactured housing still is the poorest quality housing in most of our housing markets, and some of the oldest housing that is causing problems in these areas. But new manufactured housing is a very different product and has a tremendous amount of viability, and we put together a number of recommendations around that topic. So 2017, we put out this report, and we spend the balance of the time up until now working with leaders around the state in describing these policy recommendations, having discussions with people who are responsible for funding and developing policy in adopting any of these policy recommendations. And so that is an ongoing discussion, and that is something that we will continue, and we'll continue with your support, and we can at a separate meeting we can sort of have conversations around where each of those agenda items may lead, could lead, and how we could further those. But what I want to spend the balance of my short time this morning talking to you about are some of the things that in the last year or so Housing Virginia has been seeing that are part of some of those top level categories I talked about that are really interesting to us. Things that we're kind of keeping an eye on, things that we think may move the needle within some of those categories of housing need in rural areas. So I'm going to go through these 6 items. So like I said, one of the big things that Housing Virginia does is hold events. We usually hold one main conference, sort of a statewide conference a year. And the conference we held in 2019 was just back in May, and it was called Housing X. Did anyone attend Housing X? A couple people attended. Well, you're all invited in 2021, which will be the next Housing X. So the idea behind Housing X was to hold an industry-wide affordable housing conference focused on housing innovation. So the realtors and the developers in the room know that housing supply there's no major breakthrough on the horizon for how we move the needle on housing supply. the housing supply is constrained with labor, constrained with rising costs for materials, land, zoning, etc. So the idea behind Housing X was to bring people from around the country in to present on really disruptive ideas that could disrupt the industry and really move the needle on the housing supply side. Really change the game around how the market and access to housing can exist. A lot of the reason we developed this conference was that this is also a focus of VHDA, which is Virginia Housing Development Authority. We've got a number of folks today from VHDA here, and I'll introduce them a little later, and they'll also be doing some presenting later in the morning. But they are really focused on housing innovation, and they'll talk about it when they present, because they see their dollars going into projects and they want to make a greater impact. They want to see those dollars go further. They want to see the production of affordable housing really dramatically increase. So they have set aside a pool of funds in their tax credit application solely for projects that that have an innovative component. And we'll let them kind of talk a little bit further about that later, but they are really trying to incent the industry to think outside the box and to do something that would have scale and that would have magnitude. So Housing X was a day-long conference held in Richmond. It had speakers from around the country who spoke about different innovations that they're either trying to get off the ground or that they're actively developing. And it tended towards, this year, a lot of ideas around construction materials and methods, manufacturing of housing. And I imagine in later years we can kind of change up that tact, but for this year I wanted to just share with you a few of the really interesting new ideas that we heard about. So Clayton Homes, one of the largest manufactured home developers or builders, the largest in the country, was one of the presenters at the event. And they spoke about their on-site, off-site plans, as they call it. So, they build homes in a factory. They've got a factory in Tennessee. They've got a factory in North Carolina. And vendors can buy those homes, sell them off a lot as a mobile home, as a trailer, as a manufactured home. Clayton is developing a new business model that they're calling on-site, off-site, where they're going to work with developers, landowners, jurisdictions to bring homes to a site and make them permanent homes on the site, just like a stick-built home. And so the idea there is that you could have some really significant cost savings in construction as opposed to a stick-built home. You add on to the cost of a mobile home the cost to do the hookups, the cost to do a foundation, and you're going to have some front-end work around working with local building codes for this new model, but their business pitch is that overall you're going to see a pretty dramatic decrease in expenses for this type of development. And they're sort of envisioning this as if you would do a tract of these, you would do a little subdivision of these model homes. And they're also focused on the design of them. So, they're trying to really make them look a lot more like the stick-built homes with pitched roofs and so forth. So one of the other presenters was a group out of Pittsburgh called Module, which I found really interesting. So this is a home that Module has designed and that they've patented, which is the same home, just built on like Legos. So the idea here is that this would be for infill housing, and you can go to their website now. If you live in Pittsburgh, they have a website where they've listed all of the vacant lots for sale in Pittsburgh, and you take a tour of this index on their website. You pick one that you think is in a location you'd like to live in, and they'll tell you, based on the size of that lot and the zoning requirements, you can fit an XYZ one of our models on that lot. And the idea here is that this is a starter home model. This is a millennial home buying model. This is a model where you buy an initial home at a very small footprint. This is a 600 or 700 square foot home at the beginning there, where you have a single person and a single dollar sign. So it's a very small, affordable home that can then be added onto as that person's life evolves and their family grows or changes. And there's even an option for an additional, one of the larger versions is a version where it's a second apartment. So it can be a grandmother's suite or a rental unit. And they are currently patenting this design, and this is the way the home looks in a more realistic fashion. And this is something that they're rolling out in Pittsburgh. So the last one I won't spend too much time on. This is a shipping container home. And we had this brought in from Idaho to the Housing X conference. So this was on location in Richmond, and then it went up to Washington, D.C. to be part of HUD's Housing Innovation showcase, and then it'll be coming back down to Richmond, and it'll be installed on a site in Richmond and sold as an affordable home. And I'll let VHDA speak about this because they were our partner in bringing this out and working with IndieDwell, and they're really hoping to see more of this company's work done in Virginia. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is something that we have been seeing a lot of activity around, particularly in the last year or two, which is Virginia Housing Development Authority's Community Impact Grants. How many of you have heard of this funding source? You don't get to raise your hand if you're a VHDA employee. But how many of you have heard of it? A few of you. Does anyone know if any jurisdictions up here are currently using the funding for any projects? Okay.
Winchester area.
Yeah. Yes.
Charleston area.
Yes, thank you. So Housing Virginia helped, it was Northern Shenandoah Valley, so it was Winchester, Page, Clark counties, a 5-county jurisdiction that used this grant to do a housing needs assessment. Charlottesville recently completed one, and I've listed here a few different examples of other areas that are working on these. So VHDA has used its grant funds to help a number of regions, and they usually like to see this done at a regional level, to do a deep dive into taking stock of what's your current housing market, what are your housing needs, and what are some best practices, policies, and solutions to addressing those housing needs. So you may see these reports look at zoning changes, they may look at recommended affordable housing programs to be implemented. They may even look at different tracts of land and the viability for housing to be developed on various tracts of land. I would say that we have seen jurisdictions really tailor these grant funds to their specific needs around what they want to study and how they want to move that conversation forward locally, because this conversation around understanding what affordable housing means, what is needed in the jurisdiction, and how to get there is something that is becoming much more commonplace. It's not just sort of an industry insular conversation. It's having a lot of broad conversations. In Farmville and Prince Edward County, a coalition came together of representatives from Longwood University, the major employers in the area, so that's the hospital system and the university, the school superintendents, and local officials and housing providers, so the local Habitat affiliate and so forth. And they all came together because they all acknowledged that there was a real constraint on the affordable housing in the area, and that both owners and renters had a very limited supply. So I would really encourage those of you in the room who have influence with local government or who are representing local government to really consider using community impact grant funds as a great jumping off point to start studying this and start to develop some policy recommendations. And we've got VHG folks in the room if you have any specific questions about it. So the next thing I want to talk about is at the federal level. Fannie and Freddie are working right now on a pilot, a 3-year pilot. They're in year 2 of a 3-year pilot under an obligation called duty to serve. So they are looking at different markets in which they now have a mandate to increase their lending and their work in. And those 3 focus areas are manufactured housing, rural housing, and affordable housing. So check, check, check. You know, those are the things that I imagine as we have gone and done these events around the state. These are the things that we hear about. These are the needs that we hear about. And these are now a mandated focus for Fannie and Freddie Mac. And they are spending 3 years doing pilot programs to understand how they can meet the obligations of this new federal mandate that they have, and lend fairly and lend within the risk profile they need to lend in. And so one thing in particular that we're keeping a close eye on is their increased lending in manufactured housing. So they have a pilot in 2019 and 2020. They'll be buying several thousand chattel loans, so loans for manufactured homes. And they'll be buying those to look at how they perform and to really understand how they could be a major player in manufactured housing lending. If Fannie and Freddie play a major role in manufactured housing lending, that is going to substantially change that industry and change that market. So that's something that we're paying really close attention to. It's something that if you're in a role of advocating legislators or for the federal government, you may want to consider including this in your platform as something that you want to encourage, or at the very least learn more about and keep tabs on. So here in Virginia, something that we have found really interesting and that we'll be exploring more in depth this August when we hold a statewide meeting of land banks is the rise of Virginia land banks. So this is very new. This happened in 2016. The General Assembly passed enabling legislation to allow the state of Virginia to create land banks. Land banks can be quasi-public-private entities. They can be programs housed within local government, or they can be standalone nonprofits. There are about 4 or 5 active in Virginia right now. I'm very familiar with the Richmond and Chesterfield because our organization helped create them and we operate them. They're the same land bank in those two jurisdictions. And like I said, we'll be convening a meeting in August of the land banks. They're each doing something a little different, but we'll be meeting together later this year to understand kind of how it's going, take a pulse, and see where they're headed. But the basic idea here is these all came out of a desire by localities to do something with their vacant, underutilized land. And the land bank serves as a mechanism for local jurisdictions that have control of that land. So it really does require land that has been taken through tax foreclosure or abandonment, land that now a local jurisdiction is sitting on, they don't want to have on their books, they don't have any ability to do anything with it, and it's a liability for them. It's a way for them to transfer the property to a land bank that then has a set of sort of prescribed plans and a mission to identify a viable and community beneficial use for those properties. So that could be housing, it could be affordable housing, it could be a commercial use, it could be a park, it could be whatever it is that the community benefit. Actually, the one in Chesapeake is focused on industrial uses. So they're really focused on economic development and jobs and using their land bank as a mechanism to take those underutilized properties, those vacant properties, and kind of convert them into a useful function. So land banks are common throughout the country, but they're new to Virginia, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they operate and what they're able to do. The land banks in Richmond and Chesterfield are very focused on affordable housing. That's their top line mission. That's their main focus. So from a housing perspective, it's going to be interesting to see. And I know Danville as well is very focused on housing. So I talked a lot about manufactured housing. Talk more and more about it, which would make me dad proud because he worked in manufactured housing for about 35 years. The Manufactured Housing Community Coalition of Virginia. This is a new nonprofit, new statewide nonprofit that was created. It's really kind of gotten off the ground in the last year. The focus of this nonprofit is to actually preserve and improve manufactured housing. Their first goal, their first mission is to focus on parks. You know, a lot of manufactured housing is a single wide on a private parcel of land, and it's not affiliated with a park, it's not in a manufactured home community. But MHCCV's focus at their initial stage is to focus on parks and to recognize that even parks that are in severe decline, that are in really poor condition, can be salvaged and can be preserved as affordable housing. That this is some of the most affordable housing that we have in our jurisdictions, and replacement of it, even replacement of it with really high quality new manufactured housing, is some of the most affordable new development that we could do. There's also there are a lot of resources around the country for resident-owned parks. You know, a lot of the difficulties with parks, the financial difficulties that arise, are in part because they're structured so that the land is leased to the owner, and so you know, if you have a park that's owned by someone who doesn't maintain the park and doesn't kind of keep up that landlord side of things, things can kind of go awry. So there's been a strong movement to resident-owned parks, and this nonprofit is focused on bringing that here in a stronger way to Virginia. And they really want to position themselves as a statewide resource, and they're a coalition, so they're looking for members. So if you are a housing provider here in this region and you would like to be a representative of this region on this coalition, I can connect you with them because there are parks being acquired by nonprofits around the state and being improved and kind of repositioned as really quality, affordable housing. And this organization wants to be a resource for local government and for those organizations who may be interested in working in manufactured housing. So if a local government said, we have this really problematic park in our jurisdiction, it's got horrible infrastructure, you know, sewage problems, it's got basically roads that are not really roads. We constantly hear about this from code. We want to see something improved here. We know it's really substandard housing, but if we just kind of throw the book at them and we shut this park down, now we've kind of displaced 60 families that we know they're not going to have another place to go. We know they're not going to find housing that they can afford in this region. What do? We're in like a rock and a hard place. We just let this thing linger. This organization really wants to be a resource for people like that so that they can connect you with the financial resources, they can connect you potentially with developers who are interested in doing this work, they could connect you with best practices about how to deal with code enforcement and work with park owners to make improvements.
When you say resident owned, are you talking about for residents to buy lots within a mobile home park? Or are you talking about a homeowners association that would acquire and?
Yeah, so the model that they're working through is a owned cooperative, cooperatively like a homeowners association, so that the land would be owned by an association of the residents. So the last thing I'll finish with is just a reference to Housing Virginia's resources. We do policy reports like the rural report, and then we have a lot of data on our website, including map-based data. And this in particular is a set of maps that we did that are a rural housing directory of resources and players in rural areas that are focused on housing. Later this year, we're going to be working with BHDA on creating something called a workforce housing portal. So workforce housing and the need for workforce housing is a very substantial thing that we hear about. And so we're going to be working with BHDA later this year to try to develop some resources for folks on our website that can help point people in the right direction about policies and about people who are trying to do this work. And later, well, pretty soon in the next couple minutes, a couple of the questions I have for you all are around workforce housing, because part of us developing this is getting input from everyone here. So that's just an image of our website and some of the different resources that we have. There's my information. So before I turn to the conversation piece, does anyone have any questions?
You gave some examples of alternative housing or ways of being affordable, like in Pittsburgh and other things. Is there much of a track record so far with those? How long have those been in existence? How are they working to date? And who's taking the lead on that? Is it local business people, local builders? You know, how's that developing?
So I would say the Pittsburgh one in particular is brand new, and they're sort of a startup, right? And they don't have a track record, and they're some entrepreneurs in Pittsburgh who are trying to roll this model out and then scale it. So time will tell on that. The Indie Dwell is a much more established, that's the shipping container home, is a more established product, and they're not the only one doing that kind of work. That's a somewhat established but pretty minor construction method to do shipping container homes. Their kind of entry into the market is to scale it and to focus it on affordable housing. That's part of their mission, is to bring it to market at an affordable rate. That organization, BHDA can speak to later. BHDA is actively working with them to bring that to the state and to see that be a model here. So that's how I think you would see that scaled, is not by them coming in on their own or smaller developers adopting it. Clayton Homes, same thing. You know, they I think we'll talk about that a little bit as well. They do have some demonstration projects going on around the state, and I think that we're going to be, in many jurisdictions, we're going to be hearing a lot more from them. We're going to be getting kind of courted to roll out more of these demonstration projects. And they have a lot of capital and they have a lot of bandwidth to proliferate that. And what we keep hearing in all of these rural markets is this real gap between what's needed and what's being provided. That the stick-built market is not providing what folks see as the demand on the ground. And so I think Clayton sees that as a real entry point, and time will tell, especially with these demonstration projects, how successful they are in getting through there.
I'd be curious if they have information addressed, but you still have the infrastructure issue though, as far as putting infrastructure in place and how expensive that is, before you get to the point of the home. So I haven't heard you
Are you
talk
talking
about that, but I mean roads, water, sewer, you know.
Yeah,
just-
so you're
just
not
making
talking
that
about
buildable
hookups.
lot, but-
You're not talking about individual hookups for a building, but rather if you're doing this on green land. Yeah, so their demonstration project in Virginia is infill. It's infill in an existing downtown. So they're dealing with it in that way. But I'm not really sure what their strategy is when you get out
The
to
rural market,
a
yeah.
much more rural area. Yep. Anything else?
You mentioned planning, we're working real closely with manufactured housing. Is that something that they've given any consideration to programs similar to the HDA as far as lending for a higher loan value or lower PMI potentially?
Do you want to answer? You want to? I can't really speak to that at all. I'm not sure.
How would they, you know, how would they look?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah, so it would be, the home that Eric was talking about, it's for Fannie Mae, it's the MH Advantage, for Freddie Mac, it's Choice Home. So it's this next generation of manufactured homes. So they'll do that with their home ready product. As far as the MI, it's gonna be your standard
Okay.
MI with those.
Very good, thank you.
One other question. It seems to me that right now, if builders would have good places to build, there's a whole lot of models that would work, that there's just even a struggle to find that place to start building. Is there any efforts that are being made in that regard to work with local municipalities to create more space or ease the process at all?
You're talking about not necessarily access to green undeveloped properties, but regulation that it takes to get approvals on a development, or talk more specifically about what the
honestly,
constraint is.
both. I would say, designation of land in the way that you can build and getting through the process with local government. Do you have any, efforts being made toward that?
Yeah, so in non-rural areas, we have spent a lot of time around zoning policy changes, particularly inclusionary zoning, which is a way in which you either mandate or incentivize developers for every market rate unit that they build on a development, they get a bonus if they add an affordable unit. But that is something that is in an urban market. So I would say that increasing multifamily or more dense single-family zoning is a strong recommendation in the rural report that we put together for rural areas. And in terms of where that recommendation is headed and how it's being developed, I think that the best indicator of how that is being received is where we're seeing these community impact grant funds being used from VHDA, because that is consistently a top line recommendation that comes out of those reports is, have more smaller lot requirements for single family housing, have a multifamily zone when you're in a jurisdiction that would warrant a multifamily zone. And so to see those grants are jurisdiction led, that you have to be a jurisdiction to apply for those funds, right, Luke? I think.
Or PDC or something.
Yeah, or PDC. It can't be from a private developer can't get access to those funds. And so you see these jurisdictions using those funds to really develop those kinds of recommendations. And they're not easy to then implement, right? They're a real challenge. But in rural areas, there are some jurisdictions that still aren't really even putting housing as a priority in their comprehensive plans. So, there's a wide range of phenomenon out there in rural areas, but we definitely see it trending towards those conversations and pushing those. And I think, we could definitely share with you some places that are implementing those, some success stories. If that was helpful to say, look at what they did down in, Bath County or whatever, we could definitely pull that kind of stuff together for you. Anything else? All right, so we're gonna turn to, each of your tables has a set of questions, and so this is really helpful for us as we continue doing this work to hear from you about what's happening here locally, and these conversations have been really productive. So we're gonna give you 15, 20 minutes, maybe less, we'll see how it goes, to answer those questions as a group. So you just pick someone from your table who's willing to write your answers down, and then we'll kind of report out about it and talk about it.
City council hasn't become effective yet. It'll become effective at their next council meeting when they take their final vote. But we just passed the R8 small lot residential district, which would allow for higher density for single-family detached duplex, and by special use permit, you could request it for townhomes on smaller lots. So I'm interested to see how this all plays out. You know, this is all new to us. It's a new zoning district designation. We haven't rezoned areas by the city action, so it would be up to a developer or property owner to come to us with a rezoning request to rezone to R8. And then in the coming years, we'll be working on updating, overhauling of our zoning ordinance. So we'll be looking at more comprehensively of all of our zoning districts, not just creating a new one or fixing one at a time. We'll look at that comprehensively.
What's the criteria? Or you say the developer has to come to you for the rezoning request, so what's the criteria to request them? For the lot or the property to
I'm not
request
sure I
that?
understand the question. The location, as Mr. May had just stated, but location, I guess, really that's the primary thing. And I anticipate that to make this work, another action that our staff and planning commission are probably going to have to talk about is looking at possible amendments to our comprehensive plan, even though we just adopted it at the end of last year, but to provide more opportunities for locations where these smaller lot single-family homes can go. We'll update the comprehensive plan to allow for that, you know, to recommend or be in favor of that increased density. So that when somebody comes in with a rezoning application, the comprehensive plan would support that.
And would you say that the one of the main impetus for that work that you did in creating the new zone was housing affordability?
That's one of the primary reasons. Or what that other gentleman had mentioned about just the cost of building, and a lot of people couldn't build on land that we have around the perimeter of the city that's vacant, and even the cost of developing those. Like we were hearing, like without increasing density, like we just can't do it. So we're hoping that this is just one part of that toolbox.
And that more holistic look that you're going to be undertaking is also being driven primarily around an affordable.
That will be one component of it. There's a number of things that it's just best practice that we should be updating at some frequency, updating our zoning ordinance and looking at it. So we'll be looking at parking regulations as well as you know, the zoning district regulations in terms of density.
I just wanted to say that both Rockingham and the city, they've been progressive on this issue, and they've tried to look at it. And before they had large lots, and they were sort of like forcing, actually helping to create urban sprawl. But now they're doing the reverse and bringing it back in, trying to get more density. And I think that's exactly the model.
Yeah. So you have your costs. Oh, yeah. You want to repeat it? Or you think you can hear it better?
Yeah, I was just saying that that in the past, our localities have actually increased urban sprawl because we had bigger lots, and it was much more expensive to develop. And now they're trying to get everything more dense and more compact, and everything around the water and sewer. And I think that's the right model to do, because trying to get more of an urban type of approach. And I think they've been quite progressive on that issue.
Yeah. So you have your costs as being a constraint that's really outside of your hands. It's either driven by the state or it's driven by the industry of what construction labor and materials are. You have your zoning that you can start making influences on, and it sounds like some folks in the room really feel like the jurisdictions are leading on that, and that they're really trying to respond to that and address it. How do people feel public opinion plays into this. How is NIMBYism, is that going to be a real constraint to doing this kind of stuff?
What do you mean by that?
Public opposition to growth,
Oh,
public
gotcha.
opposition to increased density, and all of the things that relate to that. You know, schools, taxes.
I think it's
all
going
of
to
that
be the
stuff.
biggest issue that's going to impact the success of this new zone. When you try to put this all 8, I think, classification up against all 1, you're going to encounter major neighborhood opposition. It's just a fact that we won't have that in our community. I guess one of the interesting, and that all adds to the cost of the development, getting a special use permit, going through that rezoning. So, one interesting thing that's needed to be able to address that is that in Minneapolis, they upzone baby. So by right, you can increase your density, you can have multifamily, and only by exception then that you cannot do that or change that. And that would really promote, the planners in the room is going to go crazy with that type of philosophy because it's kind of a sprawl type of activity, but it really would address this NIMBYism issue and this the cost associated.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Wong, and I would encourage you all to consider that when you hear later on about the city working on the zoning ordinance update. I mean, upzoning is a possibility that the city of Harrisburg could take that action to rezone these properties so that developers don't have to go through that process. So that, but I agree that NIMBYism is a concern that I have just in general. People
Yeah.
don't understand what they don't understand.
Yep.
It's concerns.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and the only good news I would say about that is I think that because the issue of affordable housing is affecting people at higher and higher income levels, it's resonating a lot deeper into communities. It still doesn't mean people want to see an apartment complex next to their single family home and to have more traffic on their streets or more students in their schools. So, but the awareness level is definitely increased from our perspective. So anything else you want to add to that first? What are, yeah, go for it.
I love it. It's really changed in the last few years. I think it's always been like this. The low-income housing tax credit program really favors your urban markets versus rural.
Yeah, yep. So what do you guys think are one of the most urgent needs for housing today? Single family. Yep. What about you? What about you guys back here?
Yeah,
Inventory.
Any inventory.
Anybody say rental was their biggest need? Anybody talk about seniors? Is that something that you spend a lot of time talking about? You did.
Somewhat, we talked about more of a philosophical need, which is to redefine affordable housing, not just we need to build more lower priced inventory, because all it does is kick the can down the road, because when those individuals start, growing, their family starts growing or whatnot, they're going to need to move up as well, which is kind of the problem. So we have to look at, for lack of a better term, market fluidity overall. Because when it's more economical, more financially reasonable for a family to stay, or an elderly couple to stay in their home rather than move and downsize, then it creates a backlog. And so I think part of that market fluidity is not just having increased density, but also intentionally trying to have more 55 and older communities. Because a lot of individuals who are in that category who would be eligible for a 55 and older community, they don't want to be in the community with young professionals who might be partying or in grad school or whatever the case may be. So if you can create some of those communities that create options for the different demographics, age demographics, 55 communities type thing, then you help to create market fluidity overall, which is going to help in the process of relieving stress on the lowest income, because those people in the lower income who might be able to move up, they can't move up.
Yep.
There's nothing to move up to.
Yeah, it's all connected. Yeah, and recognizing that connection. Yep. Anything else on urgent needs that?
You said about, rentals, so I do property management, and if I have a, nice affordable rental, anything 1,200 and less, within 24 hours, I'll have between 50 and 100 inquiries in one property. And, we have no trouble filling those with well-qualified people. The people I'm concerned about are people who maybe have less credit, limited income, and I don't know how they get housing. I have no idea.
Thank you so much.
And
That's all problem. We appreciate you saying that.
what I see more often than not is that they will end up finding family or friends and probably breaking some zoning as far as
Doubling, tripling.
yeah, how many people there should be in a place, because they really have no place else to go. So I don't know. There aren't even options for many people.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to address with regard to rural housing, the local housing tax credit program does have a set aside for rural housing. It's about 9.5% of the annual allocation. So there is that incentive to provide housing in these areas. And then also our innovative pool, which is something that we are starting for the next 3 years. You can apply, send us a letter of intent, and then apply if you have any innovative projects for rental housing under the program. We are looking at, I'm on our rural housing committee, and we are looking at different things. I know a lot of it's focused on home ownership, but we are also, trying to encourage new ideas and incentives for rental housing.
Yeah.
Connectivity is a big issue. I know Chantel and other organizations are trying to expand their reach as far as internet access. There's for a lot of folks that we're working with, they're doing home-based work, or as opposed to commuting to a job site, and that's one of the first questions we're getting asked in some of the more rural locations is what's the connectivity to the rest of the world so that I can work from home.
Yep.
That's a big issue. I don't know if this group is working with
We have,
other
yeah,
companies
we
to try to
haven't.
help that develop.
We have not dived into that, but it has unprompted come up at every single event as a huge issue. So I know that rural development is focused on it. I know that non-housing, DHCD may be focused on it as well, but yep.
So I worked at PhD
Ah.
and broadband funding is from 4 million to 19 million.
Yeah, that's the state housing agency, DHCD. Right. So moving on, tell me some good news. Not many people. Rates are down. Unemployment's down, or job growth is good.
Houses that are listed sell quickly and easily.
Yep. If you own a home and you have somewhere else you can afford to go, you can sell yours fast. Yep. And the zoning changes are happening, taking those steps. Yeah. Did you have something?
Just like with the availability of information online, Google or whatever, you have more educated buyers, sellers, realtors, lenders. Just everyone's, dare I say, smartest.
Yeah, so the tools to address these things are zoning tools, which are locally controlled, and it sounds like those conversations are happening and things are taking place. Money, right? Subsidy coming from VHDA or DHCD or the federal level, and housing-related funding is increasing. It's increasing at the federal level and it's increasing at the state level. The problem and the need is outpacing those increases, but that is a positive trend. And then, tackling the cost side, that construction side, whether it's through zoning or through manufactured housing, I think that's something we're really focused on trying to understand and see if there's going to be something that kind of breaks through breaks through on that for everyone in urban and rural areas. Any other improvements over the last 3 years? Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about before I turn it over to Mike at VHDA is this workforce housing. So how many people have talked about workforce housing before I make you talk about it today? Okay. And the first question is, what does it mean? Does anyone want to throw out a definition? Try to be as specific as you can. I got a really, really nice specific definition down in Martinsville that I'll tell you after you tell me your definition. Anybody have a definition?
It's the group above some level of assistance for assisted housing or entry level.
Entry level. So give me an example of a job somebody would maybe have that would qualify for this housing.
Well, I live down the valley and they brought in a lot of industry workers and brewery down there. They didn't have places where they could live. $300,000 homes.
Construction
Laborers, okay. Any other definitions? Yeah.
Teachers, firefighters, police.
Yeah, down in Martinsville, somebody said people are earning between $18 and $20 an hour, and I liked that because then that's something you could deal with. All right, let's work backwards and build the housing for them. So this definition can be broad, and it broadens as more and more people need affordable housing because whatever their salary is from their job no longer can, keep up with these $300,000, $400,000 homes. But traditionally, this was a way to explain that those sort of bread and butter, basic services that you need in your community, your teachers, your daycare workers, your barista at Starbucks, housing that they can afford. So this is a focus for us because they can't afford market rate housing in almost every jurisdiction around the state when you look at the median rents or the median sales prices compared to what the salaries are for those jobs. People are paying far more than what is considered a reasonable amount of your biweekly paycheck towards their rent or their mortgage payment. So it's kind of trying to drill down on this and understand, do we need a different definition for different regions? And I think we do, because in Martinsville it is $18 to $20 an hour, but here it may be a higher band. You may go up to $25, $30 an hour when you look at who can't afford housing in an area. So what type of housing would people in this category need? Is it primarily single family home ownership, or is it rental, or is it both? Combination, both. Okay.
Communities that I'm seeing more of is buying townhouses, so it's home ownership, but not a single family home.
And you're seeing, so a lot of places we go, people say that'll never fly, but here it's pretty well.
In the city, I don't know if other realtors have different experience, but I'm seeing more and more of that with my clients in the city.
Would people say it's only in Harrisonburg that people would buy a townhome? Buy something that's, what? Okay.
Local towns, just outside the city limits. More on, this is more on the way. There's no negative stigma on townhouses.
Okay. Good. All right, so would you say that workforce housing is being produced in the area, or no, because of this price issue, because anything that you can build is going to be starting at well over 250,000. Is anybody building workforce housing in the area? Is anyone focused on that, trying to make that a business model, kind of thread that needle? Habitat for Humanity, yep.
But even with the townhouse communities, when they get built, they are sold before they are built. Take
Yeah.
like the towns of Bluestone. There's places that haven't even broke ground and they're already under contract, or Cedar Point or other places. Yeah, they just can hardly keep up with it. But I think it does go back. A lot of the developers are saying, "Wow, I got to get through a lot of process and a lot of time." Somebody could try to come up with a plan today to develop something, and it might not hit the ground for a few years. And it's hard to put that sort of commitment into it. So I think it's part of the process as well.
I think a lot of those, when they do developments like that too, though, I think a lot of investors snap those up, because I know that those townhouses Randy Cosner did, I mean, they never even put them in the market. They sold them all to investors and they would have been in perfect affordable housing. They were in the 150 to 170 range. But I don't think they sold a single one to the homeowner. I think they all
And
went to investors.
the investors are renting them?
I've worked on a couple of workforce housing projects, and I'm working on one right now, and the biggest problem that we have is the negative connotation of neighboring properties with respect to workforce housing and what it is and who lives there and that sort of thing. That's the number one problem that we have, getting those projects approved today.
You're saying that when you put a proposal out there, the neighboring property owners,
It's perceived as
Are-
being something less than
yeah,
acceptable for that particular
yeah,
area.
yeah, which is ironic because
Huge problem.
the point of making that definition was to remind people that the person who teaches your kid every day needs a place to
It's a
live.
place to live.
Yeah, 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 okay.
We're seeing a lot of demand for multi-family type within the structure. So, kids moving back home, parents moving in with their kids.
Yeah.
So having multi-generational in the same residence. So I think the city is starting to pay attention to that and being flexible for that accessory dwelling within
Yeah.
the dwelling. So new construction may not be the total answer. Allowing for the multi-generational housing to grow, I think that's another segment that could help address the issue.
And when I was spending a lot of time talking about manufactured housing, were you like, yes, finally someone talks about the value and benefit of manufactured housing because I love it as a source of affordable housing? Or are you not so happy about that?
Small building standards are raised, it's great.
Try to get,
a rezoning.
meaning, you mean try to get it zoned to be an allowable use
Yes,
for, yeah.
because there's no
Yeah.
allowable use that's not already.
Yeah, it's not zoned currently, it's grandfathered.
Yeah.
Okay,
You will never get a brand new
Okay.
rezoning.
Okay.
It's just impossible.
okay.
I grew up in West, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I overheard somebody over here, yeah.
Rockingham County allows newly created manufactured home parks. So come to the county, you can get.
You can do
I
one.
don't know if you'll-
Rockingham County's
Approved,
open for
but you can
business.
apply.
You're open for business, yeah. I mean, it's also good for senior housing, right? That's Florida for you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have?
The model is wonderful, to build these things in factories and so forth and bring them out in sections. That's wonderful. It's just the standards of building is not there traditionally. And if they would be, I think it would be a fantastic innovation.
So how many people agree with that the standards, the quality there is just not there? Yeah, so what I hear from the industry, which is biased, but what I hear from the industry is that that is a perception that they're trying to solve because they really feel that they are there with the safety standards and the quality for the construction. So, but I think that's a real barrier for them is convincing, right? And making that case and making that really widely accepted.
I grew up in West Palm Beach, so mobile home parks are all over the place, and there are beautiful mobile home parks.
Good morning. I'm Robin Chapman with Rural Development, and Stephanie Smith is the technician in our office here in Harrisonburg. She's going to be handing out a package that has some brochures and also the PowerPoint that we're going to be presenting today. A lot of conversation about housing and what is affordable and what we can do. In listening to that, our 502 single-family housing program is something that we offer at Rural Development. So I know that it's everyone's dream to own a home, and a lot of first-time home buyers, as well as the low-income and very low-income folks, qualify for our program. We do offer the interest rate at 3.5% is the interest rate that is for the 502 program at this point. So when a lot of lenders aren't able to help folks due to the fact that these are very low and low income families, they will come to Rural Development, and sometimes it's just by word of mouth. We have a lot of folks that come to us that get a home, and from just, one person to another, they find out that our program offers a subsidized loan program. I'm not sure if I'm clicking this properly. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Thank you. Just a little technical difficulty there. Okay, so buy or build a home. We can do both under our program. If someone comes to us and they're wanting to purchase a home, we can actually do loans for existing homes. Someone mentioned modulars. We can do modulars. We can do stick-built. We can actually do new manufactured as well as existing. The existing would be under a pilot program, and those would have to be manufactured on or after January 1st, 2006. For existing manufactured homes as well as the new manufactured homes, those would be at 30 years. Our other loans are at 33 years, and then for some of those, we can go a 38-year term. Okay, we make it easy. There is no down payment. This is a 100% financed program. The monthly payments are based on income. So it's a fixed rate at 3.5% currently. We have been at that rate for several months. Closing costs can possibly be added into the loan, as well as repairs financed into the loan. There's no PMI and no prepayment penalties. Okay. The one thing is that it is a subsidized loan. If they qualify for subsidy, we can actually subsidize down to a 1% payment. So that means that if they qualify, they may be able to pay at a 1% interest rate, and then we would subsidize between the 1% and 3.5%. So talking about affordable housing, that's pretty affordable. Not everyone qualifies for the program, but in talking about the workforce, a lot of the folks that are in that category do qualify for the program. A lot of the folks that work at your factories, Cargill, a lot of the poultry plants, Marshall's distribution, Walmart distribution. You know, we have a lot of those factories here. And those are the folks that come to us for financing because they can't afford to go to, you know, a lender and make that payment. They need that help. They need that subsidy. So we're here for those very low and low income applicants, okay? There is the Guaranteed Home Loan Program. Under this program, approved lenders, such as banks and credit unions, make loans to low and moderate income families. So if the applicants do not fall within the very low or low income category, then they could possibly qualify for a guaranteed loan, which would be with one of the lenders that participate with our program. And then we do the guarantee of that loan, okay? Guaranteed loan funds may be used to build, rehabilitate, improve, or relocate a dwelling in an eligible rural area. Our guaranteed loan program has gone national, so if there are any questions about this particular program, there is an address that you can actually contact someone for help with that. I typically tell folks that if they're interested in the program to contact the bank that they're working with, see if the bank would work with them on a guaranteed loan. If not, then they could always get in touch with this address that would be able to provide them with more information, since it is on a national level at this point. Okay, direct home loans, like we've talked about in the beginning, that is what Stephanie and I work at here in Harrisonburg. And we are, I would say, the busiest office in the state. This area seems to be booming as far as folks that want to buy a house. And it's probably due to the fact that the need is there for housing. So we generally, within the last, I'd say at least 5 years, we have, our office has made the most of the 502 direct loans. And I know that someone had mentioned something about credit and low income or very low income, like a credit situation. So we do pre-qualifications. And so Stephanie is the first person that they will contact. She will do a pre-qual with them. If there are credit issues, then we give them some counsel on what they need to do to fix your credit, so that you might be able to come back to us and you might be able to qualify for the loan. So we don't leave you hanging. You know, we actually give the applicant some hope of fixing your issue with credit and moving forward. A lot of times folks will do a pre-qualification 2, 3, 4 times before they finally get things fixed. So we're here to help the applicant through the process. Yes?
So, something that I've imparted on my children and I see in other families as well is maintain good fiscal management, personal fiscal management.
Right.
Financial management. So, for those who follow that, work their way through school, come out with no student loan debt, save up, pay cash for a car, don't have a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they pay cash when they, you know, for things, or a debit card to use to pay cash, you know, right out. So they go to get a loan, and they're not qualified to get a loan because they have no credit. but they got a good job, they got money in the bank, they've got their retirement savings, they've got no debt,
Right.
but they can't get a loan. So the solution is go out and get a credit card and start building, using it. And so it's contrary to everything they're being taught. Is there a solution for that population of people who are being financially or fiscally responsible to be able to get a starter home?
So there actually could be. We can use alternative credit. So if there's no credit on a credit report, okay, and we pull a credit report and it says 0, your score is 0. So we'll go back to them and we'll say, do you have any alternative references? Are you renting? Yes. Okay, we'll take a rental history for 12 months. Are you paying storage cost? Do you have any other type of reference that you can provide to us? Then we'll take that in lieu of your traditional credit history. So we can do that, but we have to have something to go on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Super flexible. That is not traditional, and that's super flexible, and I think it's really innovative, especially coming out of a federal agency.
Right, and it gives folks the opportunity to, to get started. And typically, if you have a rental history and you have been renting and paying your rent on time, we look at that and say, okay, you have a good rental history, you're probably going to make your house payment. So I look at that and take that into consideration when we're doing our underwriting. There's all kinds of situations, and like you say, you can kind of look at the history of things and make a decision based on that particular person or applicant.
Maybe this was an anomaly. I don't know if it's more common or not throughout the marketplace, but picking up on what Renee was saying, the gap for affordability of what the money that people can put towards their housing that they're comfortable with for their personal budget is shrinking. The healthcare costs are killing it. Daycare costs, cost of a hamburger, city tax on just the food tax is 12.5%. So by the time you pay, get a hamburger, your costs are going up. So
absolutely,
the gap for what they can afford out of their personal budget is shrinking, while the market is getting away from them price-wise. Fortunately, Oz and Jody have personally made the interest rates come down across the country, so that helped a little bit. But helping with the personal financial management, I think, is a critical point to try to focus some of the resources, to help people get into a position, in advance. And I don't know if there are programs out there that you promote, a Dave Ramsey type, budget type classes, or promote, for people who are looking and start the process earlier to get their credit in borrowing form, so that you can make the loans instead of saying, I want to go buy a house today and then start, and now you've got a 6 to 12 month period of time, and then the market gets further away from you.
Exactly.
So,
right.
Spending some time and resources on helping people to get their finances and financial house in order, I think would be a worthy effort.
Absolutely, yes, and that's very important. That's very important. And we obviously look at the debt to income ratio, and we don't want to put folks into a home that's not going to be affordable for them. Okay, any other questions on that so far? Okay. So we're going to talk about the 504 program that we also have. This is our home repair program, loans and grants. And the loan is up to $20,000 at a 1% interest rate for 20 years. Okay, so they would have to be a homeowner. and they would have to be in the very low income category in order.
For this area, to do the grant for the home repair.
Okay.
What's the income limit for this area?
Okay, so that's based upon the number of people living in the home.
Say two.
And unfortunately, I don't have a chart with me. So yeah, I'd be happy to, if you want to email me or whatever. It is not, I'm sorry. Yeah, but email me on that and I'll be happy to do that.
You can actually do a repair grant and a combination.
Okay.
Okay.
So for 62 or older, you can qualify for the grant, okay? But you have to be 62 in order to get the grant. Otherwise, it would be a loan at 1% interest up to 20 years for that, okay? All right. The home must be modest for the area. Repairs must remove all health and safety concerns. We need at least one bid for the requested repair, and you must own the home. We can also partner with other folks to do that, People Inc., and some other agencies that we can kind of make our funds go a little bit further for that. Okay? Loan requirements for eligibility as far as the area, we do not finance in the city of Harrisonburg. That is ineligible area. So it would have to be outside of the city, in the county. And for our office, we also cover Augusta, Page, Shenandoah, Warren, Clark, Frederick, Albemarle. Help me out, Stephanie. I think that's it. So we have a pretty wide area to cover. There is an eligibility site that we do check the property on. So we can go on there and check that to make sure that the property is eligible. Self-help housing, that is also another, where rural development partners with nonprofit organizations to help families to build their own homes, so that reduces the overall cost of the mortgage. Nonprofits, participants with technical assistance, including home ownership, education, loan packaging, and construction supervision. Okay. How to apply. Our office in Harrisonburg, that's the address, the phone number. We're right here on Dyerly. You can always stop by, pick up an application, and if you would like, Stephanie has the application, or the pre-qualification in the package. Feel free to send those out to folks that you think might be eligible for our program. Any questions at this point? I think my time's about up. Thank you. You're welcome.
Director of Homeownership Lending for VHDA. We do have a couple other VHDA employees here, so I just want to briefly introduce them. So we have Sheila Stone. You can wave for everyone. She's with our rental division, specifically low-income housing tax credits. We have Luke Tate with Community Outreach with us. We have Sue Armstrong with Community Outreach as well. So the great thing about them being here is I am not experts in those areas. So if you have questions, those are your people. We also talked about NIMBYism, so I just want to address that quickly. If this is something that you believe in, if you believe in affordable housing, it's important that you show up to community meetings. So the people that typically show up to community meetings are people that do not support this. And they're the loud voices. That doesn't mean they're the majority. That means they're the people that show up and are screaming and in opposition. So if you believe in this, come to meetings and let them know that you support what they're doing. So at VHJ, we believe in, or our mission statement is helping Virginians attain quality, affordable housing. So we do that in both rental housing and home ownership. So primary focus of my presentation is going to be talking about homeownership opportunities. So at VHA, we help a lot of people buy homes. Last year, we helped about 7,400 families purchase their first home. And this is kind of a mix of the families that we've helped. So 30% of them are minorities, 57% receive down payment assistance. We have an average household size of 2, and our average age is 36. So our average income is just above $60,000 with an average loan amount of $194,000 and change. So this is kind of a good screenshot or a snapshot of who our average borrower is that we're helping throughout the state. So Erica kind of kicked this off talking about the study they did starting back in 2015, traveling around and finding what the needs are throughout the communities. And we do that as well. So we're out in our communities. Community outreach is out. How often are you guys out? 3 times a week, probably, at least, or maybe it feels like 5 to me. They're out in the communities getting a sense of what's needed. So what are the issues that you're facing in your communities? And we come out to these as well. We partner with Housing Virginia in a lot of these things. We have advisory boards as well. So we have a rural advisory board, we have a homeownership advisory board, we have rental, we have a Northern Virginia one. So we're out in our communities finding out what are the housing needs that you are facing. And then we come up with solutions to those needs. So I'm going to talk about some of the different solutions that we've come up with to talk about this. And from some of the conversation that we started with, I heard it seems like the problems have been around for a little while and we're just trying the same solutions, right? That aren't necessarily working. So just kind of keep that in mind with some of this stuff. If we continue to do the same thing over and over again, we're going to get the same results, right? So we're looking at some different innovations. So I'm going to talk about 3 different things that we're looking at, or 4 different things. We're going to talk about manufactured housing and construction lending. We're going to talk about shipping container homes, and we're going to talk about 3D printed homes. So construction lending is nothing new by any means, but it's not something that we've done in the past. So we've identified this as being a huge gap. There's not an oversupply of affordable housing, I think, anywhere throughout the state. So bringing more inventory to market, more affordable inventory to market, is a key piece, right, to help solve a portion of that problem. So this is Tanisha. She's a customer that we recently helped. She reached out to one of our direct loan originators and was ready to buy a home. She found a manufactured home that was 14 months old. Robin kind of talked about this program a little bit earlier, but at the time, it wasn't eligible for RD financing. It was a 14-month-old manufactured home that did not qualify, so she had to go with an FHA loan. Through our advisory board, so through a rural advisory board, we were at the table with rural development, and they announced this pilot program, which Robin just kind of talked about briefly, where we could finance a manufactured home that was built January 1st, 2006 or newer with RD financing. So Tanisha was able to get into her home. We flipped her from an FHA loan to an RD loan with 100% financing. So that eliminated her down payment requirements, and it reduced her monthly mortgage insurance premium. It saved her about $18,000 over the life of her loan because of partnerships with people like RD. So construction permanent lending. So Tanisha didn't need a construction loan. She went with a major manufacturer dealer, Clayton, who has a lot of resources. Our smaller independent dealers don't have the same resources as Clayton that's backed by Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. So we're launching a pilot later this year where we're going to do a construction loan program specifically tied to manufactured housing. We're going to launch it in our rural markets, and it's going to be with Rural Development's single close program. So this will be 100% financing that we'll do for these homes. And then we'll look to expand it from there into other home types, and then hopefully expand it into our whole portfolio of lending. Well, we've identified the need from our advisory groups. So as I mentioned, these smaller independent dealers, they can't float 3, 4, 5 homes at a time. They need additional resources to be able to help people buy these homes. Additionally, it's a lower entry point for people to enter into the mortgage market, and people want to buy homes. Eric had mentioned a little bit about the next generation of manufactured houses. So you're going to start to hear a lot of marketing from Clayton around this. This is a picture of Clayton's next generation of homes. So Fannie Mae is calling it MH Advantage. Freddie Mac's calling it Choice Home. So one of the questions was about lending options for this. So these are available with either Fannie or Freddie with 97% LTVs. The nice thing about these homes, higher pitched roof, attached garage, lower profile foundations. These homes are designed to fit into neighborhoods. So to fit into the traditional characteristics of any other neighborhood that you would see. We're actually working with Community Outreach is working with the city of Danville to infill 5 vacant lots currently. They're going to bring these homes in. They're doing a pilot with Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac's bringing some down payment assistance money to these homes. And we're going to infill city lots with these next generation of manufactured homes. And our hope is that once this is done in the city of Danville, other cities will be able to look to this model and see what was done here to bring in new homes to these communities. Shipping container homes. We are Chief Program Strategy actually got to go out to Idaho and tour Indy Dwell, who's manufacturing shipping container homes. These are actually considered modular homes. So similar to manufactured homes, they're built in the factory, but there's a lot of efficiencies, right, with building in a factory, saving time, construction costs, waste, and the delivery channel is a lot smoother. They're actually expanding currently. They're opening 2 operations in Florida, 1 in Colorado, and we're in talks with them to try to bring a facility to Virginia as well, which will help drive down the cost of these homes, because the delivery from Idaho is a pretty big expense coming out here. Eric talked about the Housing X conference earlier. We actually brought a shipping container home to that conference. From there, it went up to the Innovative Housing Showcase up in DC, where it was on the mall for 4 days. And then it's back in Richmond now, and it's going to be donated to a local nonprofit, sold to a very low-income family, and it's going to be placed within the city of Richmond. So, and our hope is that once it's set up, that it's going to be open for about 30 days, so we can have people come through, tour it, and see it. The Governor's Housing Conference is coming up at the end of this year. We're also in works to bring another shipping container home to the conference, as well as one of the next generation of manufactured homes. So the goal with bringing these to the Housing X Conference, up to the HUD Conference, to the Governor's Housing Conference, is to get these homes out there so people can walk through them and see it, and I love your challenge. If you guys have not been through a manufactured home in the last 5 years, a new one, this weekend, go see one. They are different than what we see, or what some of that image is. So, and that's really the intent of this, is to get these out there. At the Innovation Conference, the shipping container home we had a special guest. Secretary Carson came through. This is a picture of the interior of the home up in DC. So while Secretary Carson was there, I think he stopped by 2 or 3 times to the conference. He went through our shipping container home. He went through a traditional single wide, traditional double wide home, and one of the next generations of manufactured homes. He was pretty impressed with this. Here was one of his quotes from it, talking about the cost savings with these homes. So there is a gap in what's currently being built, stick-built, and what some families can afford, right? So these are some methods that we can look at to introduce newer, lower-cost inventory to the market. So these shipping container homes, if you guys haven't seen them before, I would ask you to do it after this, not during the presentation, but Google shipping container homes. These things are pretty impressive, and they can be stacked in almost any way imaginable. There's multifamily housing projects that are done with these as well, but they're a pretty impressive home. So this is a picture of the one that we had at the Housing X conference. So it's 3 units stacked and staggered side by side. Sue is the gatekeeper of the home. I was told not to tell the story of what happened within the house, but if you want to ask Sue some of the details about how comfortable people felt within the home, she's got a good story to come with this. So this is 3 units, 960 square feet. It's 4 bedrooms, 2 bath, and the starting price on this home is about $115,000. We're also looking into 3D printed homes. So Icon, I got to go out there earlier this year in Austin, Texas, to meet with Icon. They printed a 350 square foot house. This could be done in 1 day. And since they did that, they actually stopped producing the other homes and they worked on their technology. So they've increased their technology. They can now print a 2,000 square foot home within 3 days, in 72 hours. So not to downplay what a 3D printed home is, but they're printing walls. So they're printing the walls of the house, and then the remainder of the construction is done with traditional methods. So the windows, the roofing, the kitchen, it's still done with regular construction methods. So later this year, Icon's going to be printing a 1,500 square foot home within the city of Austin in a neighborhood, and it's going to be sat right next to 2 other homes that are identical. So there will be 3 homes lined up that, looking at them, you should not be able to tell which one was 3D printed and which was built with traditional methods. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes with that. They're also projecting for that home that's going to be printed next to 2 other methods about a 30% cost savings with that home. So Eric was talking earlier about construction. You know, what's been going on in construction hasn't really changed for the most part for decades, right? So there's new technologies that are finally being introduced to try to change that, come in with lower costs. This is actually a picture of the printer itself. So the great thing about this is it can be done, like I said, 2,000 square feet in 3 days. And there's a skilled labor shortage, right? So this addresses a portion of that problem in trying to take away some of that labor issue. Obviously, some of the concerns or some questions you guys may have is about safety, zoning, market awareness. So we've talked with the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, about this. You know, can these be zoned? And this is talking about shipping containers and 3D printed homes. So the answer to that is yes. Yeah.
The 3D printer, are you actually moving that to the site and building the home, or are they, okay.
Yeah, so this is the printer. So this is kind of what you get. And we're in talks with them to try to bring this technology to Virginia. So our plan is to bring this here and to hopefully print about 20 homes with this to prove the concept. So this can move. You can see here it's on wheels. It's on a axle, and it can basically just go down. If we had 20 homes that needed to be printed, it can just go down the row and print homes. So it is pretty fascinating. Again, after the presentation, Icon 3D printed homes, and you can see how it prints. So with the zoning, so these homes can be zoned. Same with shipping containers as well, and really the process for both is the same. So what officials need to look for is there's an exception to the building code. So it's the alternative methods or materials is what they're going to look at, and is the intent of the code being met? Is the safety intent being met? So for the shipping container, they're going to look at the thickness of the material, the strength of the material, has it been damaged, was lead paint used? And then for the 3D printed home, it's concrete, concrete's been around for a very long time. It's a very well-known material, but they're going to test a sample of it. So we brought that shipping container home from Idaho down here. We actually hired out a third-party contractor to inspect that home for us. When they were out there, fortunately it did pass. We got the seal, and it gets the same seal as a modular home. But it passed, and it comes down to us. DHCD's actually put a proposal in to update the Virginia Industrialized Building Code, which will specifically allow shipping container homes to be zoned. So you would not need to go to an exception to the zoning process, which would be a big change. Because with exceptions, obviously, one municipality can approve exception,
right next door, it may not get approved. So as far as market awareness, we're bringing this technology to Virginia. We're bringing shipping container homes to conferences. We're looking to bring 3D printed homes here and print these homes. And I love the challenge with manufactured housing. Go walk through them. The more we see this, the more that we can expose people to it. We're helping raise the market awareness. And towns are talking about things more with housing now because it's having a real impact on them. And if you look at Northern Virginia is a great example of Amazon. The reason that Amazon is coming to Northern Virginia is because housing was a piece of that presentation. So we talked about some different changes that we're looking at with housing types. Obviously, we need to get people into those housing types, right? So we have to look at some innovations and programs that we're going to do. And the nice thing about VHG is we will back the stuff that we believe in. Yes.
So we've talked a lot about that people sort of look down on or are fearful of purchasing manufactured housing because of some of the issues in the past. One of the nice things with stick-built homes currently in Virginia is that it's a spec with a 1-year builder's warranty. Are any of these going to become effective things that help buyers feel more confident in the product that they're buying? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't. Did everyone hear the question? So with a spec, and correct me if I'm misrepresented here, with a stick-built home or a spec home, it comes with a 1-year warranty. And the question was around manufactured housing. Does that come with a warranty? So,
Well, shipping containers do come with warranties.
They do?
Yes.
Do you know if the new manufactured ones do, the new blatant ones?
I don't know about that. I just know the MB-12 do come with a warranty, and I think it depends on what it is, but everything's up to at least a year, but like they'll warranty the siding and things like that.
all right, so does anyone know specific to manufactured housing? So I do not. I can make an assumption, but that's kind of dangerous in a group of people. Yeah. So I was at a meeting last night, and we were talking about modular housing came up, and this woman was telling me about a tornado that came through her neighborhood. I think it was an F3, and she talked about 2 modular homes actually got picked up and moved off their foundation. It sounded from, she didn't specifically say this, but what I heard from that is the houses got picked up and moved, but it sounded like they were still pretty intact. Her stick-built home was destroyed. So the new homes that are being built, and I think we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, they are built to a good safety standard. I mean, these aren't the homes that were built, pre-78. And I would challenge all of you, if you think about manufactured housing and you think of that one manufactured home that you see maybe every day on your drive to work or somewhere else that's not well taken care of, for some reason we paint all manufactured housing with that broad brush stroke, right? We've seen that one house where we've looked at that manufactured home park that has a bunch of older homes, and we just think that's all manufactured housing. But we don't put that same stigma with stick-built housing. So on my drive to work, I pass by a stick-built home with the roof caving in. Hasn't been maintained for probably 20 years, but that's not what I paint the wide brush, with all stick-built housing. So I would just challenge you to do that. I think that the challenge earlier of go check out manufactured housing. I mean, these are much nicer, newer homes. I am not a paid spokesman for the manufactured housing industry, but these are lower price point homes. People need and want homes. Yes.
Just a question on the manufacturer. So typically in the past they have appreciated value. So do you think that that's going to be a turnaround from now on?
So I have a real answer for that, not my opinion. So at the Housing X conference, it was actually brought up, and that is no longer true. So there's proof out there, there's data out there that shows that a manufactured home that is maintained, there's the key, right? Just like any other home type, has appreciated in value, and they can show that.
And do you want to mention the Danville demonstration project?
Yeah, so I briefly, yeah. No, so in Danville, we're doing the 5 infill city lots with the next generation of manufactured housings. But keep that in mind. I mean, there is data out there that shows these homes are appreciating. And with the next generation of homes, the great thing with Fannie and Freddie with these is we can appraise those against traditional stick-built homes. So it's not against just regular manufactured homes, which makes a big difference when you're looking at these homes. So we're still in talks. We're still in negotiations with Icon. Yeah. So we're still in talks to do it. I'm happy to give you my card afterwards, and we can talk once it's done. And it's way too early to talk about where we're even speculating these could be. So some innovations and programs. The first thing we do is we look for partnerships. So this is Shalonda. Shalonda was looking to buy a home in her rural town close to her center of employment, and just wanted something that was a good sense of community because she loved the town that she was in. She contacted one of our loan officers, and he walked her through the process, and she was able to get into her home close to her work with RD financing. Again, 100% financing, didn't have to bring any money to the table because her home appraised for more than the purchase price. And that's one of the great things about the rural development programs is you can actually roll in all of your closing costs. So we have great partners. Rural Development's one of them. Without our partnerships with Rural Development, Shalonda, Tanisha, they would not be in their homes. Or Tanisha would be in her home, but she would have been, over the life of her loan, about $18,000 more in mortgage payments because of that. We've also recently partnered with Rural Development. We are now an intermediary for them. So Robin was talking about their direct loan program, which they can directly lend money to. We are able to help those applicants as well. So our direct originations group can take applicants, package it all together, and then we turn it over to Rural Development, and it just helps speed up the process to get these customers into their homes. We also partner with Housing Virginia a lot to make sure that we're getting out in these communities and finding out what are the housing needs. Can we make sure that we're addressing them? And as I mentioned earlier, our advisory boards. So one of the programs that I'm really excited to talk about is we're partnering in our rural areas with some of our community banks. So in a lot of our rural markets, our smaller community banks do not qualify to be one of our traditional lenders within VHDA. They don't have the underwriting staff, they don't have the processing staff to qualify. So in a couple of months, we're rolling out third-party originations through our direct originations group with smaller community banks. So it's going to target our rural markets, small community banks, to allow them to offer VHDA's loan programs. So it's a way that we're looking to expand our programs into the underserved areas with more of our partners. Erica mentioned renovating homes is the #1 housing need, right? And so we partnered with DHCD. DHCD's run the Neighborhood Stabilization Program for the last 10 years. They're the experts in this program. There's no need for us to reinvent the wheel. We've got a great sister agency that we've partnered with. So we've put up $2.5 million to start this program. We're committing $5 million to it next year. This will allow housing groups to acquire undervalued properties. They can renovate the homes with our money. Then they can sell them at market value to a very low to moderate income first-time home buyer. So this is a way that we're looking to bring more housing inventory, affordable, good quality inventory to the market to try to address some of those housing needs. So before I conclude, what I want to ask everyone to do, if you want to get updates from VHDA on things that we're working on, programmatic updates, various things. I think most people, I see a lot of cell phones here. So if you can take your cell phone out, I'm going to wait for everyone. All right, if you can text to the number 22828. So that's your 2 number. So we had a lot of technical issues with this last time. So to that number, if you text a VHDA, you'll be able to sign up for our email list to get our updates. So again, my name is Mike Urban. I'm the Director of Homeownership Lending. I appreciate everyone's time. If you guys have other ideas on things that we need to explore, I welcome you to come talk to me after this and see what else we can do to help your communities.
All right,
Thank
that's
you.
it for the meeting today. So thank you so much for